Welcome to the Pod Like a Girl podcast with your host, Mia Findlay. This podcast is all about exploring and celebrating women's stories, voices, and experiences through bold and unapologetic conversations. So excited to bring you to Bali with me, hence my slightly different background. I'm over here for the next 2 weeks for a little bit of work. I'm here to finalize some stuff for an event I'm running here in August of this year. Also scouting out some potential retreat places for us to do just like a general women's retreat next year for us to all be able to connect with each other. So keep an eye out for updates about that. Got some writing deadlines that I'm here to cram some time into and also some downtime. But I do like to have my first couple of days on holiday or away doing something productive. Otherwise, I feel like I don't do well in that transition from like super busy and going away to like hard stop. So don't know what that is. Does anyone else get that? Like first couple of days of holiday anxiety? That's why I like to mix in a little bit of work. Don't know if that's a thing. But you sent across the most amazing questions for us to do, just like a bit of a chill Q&A session. And there's all kinds of stuff in here. Deconstructing from patriarchy, how I relate to femininity differently since unpacking patriarchal stuff, my hysterectomy that I've got planned, getting super personal, and obviously dangerous and indifferent men was going to be on that list of questions, which always love talking about that because it's such a needed area that we need to explore. And so we're going to dive into a few things today, and starting off with, where will we start? Let's start with, how do I get the men in my life to understand why we need them to stop being so dangerous and indifferent? Really, really difficult answer to this question because I know it's not the one that women like. And even when I do my Zoom one-to-ones with my patrons, this comes up a lot. Women who do a monthly Zoom call with me where they have questions, they want a bit more like face-to-face. And this is one of the most common ones that comes up in those Zoom calls, which is, here's the men in my life, here's something that I'm trying to communicate to them and they just don't get it. What's the magical way I can make them get it? Or how can I communicate it effectively? And I think this is one of the areas where I can be most useful to women because there's a lot of things I'm really bad at, really bad. Like maths, I think getting 17% in all my tests throughout high school was my average. There are things I'm terrible at. Effective communication is not something I'm terrible at. It's something I'm quite good at. And so I think that women come to me being like, well, if you're good at effective communication, then you can tell me how to effectively communicate this really complicated thing to this group of people who just aren't getting it, right? And my really disappointing response to that is, A, you're probably not going to be able to get them to understand it in the way that you would like them to. And also, it's not your job to. So before I even get to there's not really a way to do that that's worth your energy and your effort and your resources that you need to save for yourself and invest in yourself, it's not even your job to do that. That's their job to do. It's the job of other men to reach out to those men and appeal to them from their learnings and their understandings and try to bring them into this new or old understanding they have cultivated for themselves and sought out themselves. And I really understand why women ask this question, like, Mia, how do I get men to understand, fill in the blank here? Because if we can believe that it's just because we're not communicating clearly or we're just not going about it the right way, or as I hear all the time, like we're just not trying hard enough, or we're just not being nice enough, or we're not just appealing to them and saying it the way that they need to hear it. If we can believe that, then we can fix it, right? We can fix 10,000 years of patriarchal culture and structure, and we can fix what's happening with femicide and domestic violence, and we can change the distribution of labor within the home and mental load. If we are really the answer, then we can change it. Then we're all we need, and that is not the answer. If that were the answer, it would have worked by now in all the different waves of feminism, in all the different sociological, philosophical, very practical, political, structural things that we have changed and implemented. It would be different in a much more significant way than if it weren't the reality that we need men to be the ones who are now doing the work. And I think we're really starting to see so much of the consequence of the fact that they haven't engaged and they refuse to engage, because we're seeing it statistically, right? All this talk about young men being left behind, which is so frustrating to me. People like Scott Galloway, who's the captain of this messaging, all these reports, young men being left behind, women not partnering up with young men, and they're suffering in these ways, versus the flip of that, which is how amazing are women? How amazing are these generations of women who, for the first time, have across so many new arenas way more choice than we ever have previously, and are utilizing that choice and choosing to navigate their lives in the way that they want to without the conditioning and the oppressive structure that we're all like meant to be in these boxes of marriage and babies, and being the one who is carrying the weight of so much of our gender role. The idea that we are not taking the opportunity to say, oh, how amazing are women, that despite the fact that they have been oppressed and despite the fact that the system is rigged against them, they have been able to prosper and have been able to progress in this way. Instead, it's framed as poor boys, poor men in a world, in a society, within structures that were built for them to thrive and to prosper. And not just thrive and prosper, but thrive and prosper above everyone else, with the societal boot on the neck of everybody else, right? Speaking both metaphorically and physically in some cases. The attitude is, well, poor boys, poor men, not, oh, how amazing are young women and girls. And also, did anybody else do this big appeal to the world saying, well, young women and girls are just so left behind and they're just so unable to get ahead? No. At the first sign of men struggling within a structure they built for themselves, it's everybody else's fault, and we all have to get on board with fixing it. Even though nobody fixed it for us, we had to look at the parameters of what we were given and go, okay, well, I'm going to try to prosper despite all the ways that I am incapable, really, of having equal footing to men. And they have all the privilege and power, and we're all meant to rally and fix something we didn't build, and also that they should probably just help each other with. Wow, that was a side tangent. But all of that to say, that's the reason why we can't fix it for them. We can't change it. They haven't, by a sort of societal level or on a societal level, they haven't even reckoned with those attitudes yet, right? When you have spokesmen coming out with those kinds of attitudes, giving men and young men a free pass to victimize themselves and blame everyone else, and not look at the men who have come before them, who they've inherited this system from capitalism, patriarchy, all these things that are now starting to turn on them. They don't want to look at that. They want to make it the fault of everyone who they've oppressed, who have managed to lift themselves above that oppression. And I say this often, they don't know how to evolve. They only know how to oppress on a broader level. I have to say that all the time. It's not about any one individual man. We're talking about structures here, right? It is not your job, and also we're beating our heads against a very obstinate, stubborn wall that won't even shift its attitudes, let alone put its boots on the ground and actually make any change to meet us even halfway. And I also often say, I don't even think it's up to us to meet them halfway. We've tried to build the bridge for them. We've tried to build it halfway. We've tried to build it 2/3 of the way. We've done everything for them, and we've built the bridge for them, and it keeps collapsing because they won't reinforce it from their side. They have no interest in their share of that project. So they are now feeling those consequences, and I think they need to feel those consequences to maybe finally, hopefully, reckon with how men got here. And it's not because of women, and it's not because of marginalized groups. It's not because of the groups who white men have more broadly oppressed. It's because of the system they've inherited from other men, white men more specifically, really. So it's not your job, and it's also not going to work. I always come from like a practicality thing as well, where I think that's something else that I can help people with. Is I'm fairly good at problem solving, where I can look at a problem, as bad as I am at maths. When it comes to human behavior, I'm fairly good at looking at something and going, oh, that's not a you thing. That is the other person's thing, and that is their work to do and their job to do. And there's an analogy that really helped me when I was going through my eating disorder recovery, when I was doing a bit of this work in terms of my own relationships, where because of my eating disorder, I had to investigate all the ways in which I ended up where I did, lack of boundaries, my upbringing, relationships, etc., how I related to other people, how I showed up for them but didn't show up for myself in the same way. And I really had an epiphany when I don't even think it was my psychologist. I actually think it was my GP, who happened to be trained in psychology. He was a legend. And he said, Mia, ask me for $1,000,000. And I was like, can I have $1,000,000? And he said, no. He said, ask me why. I said, why? And he said, because I don't have it to give to you. You might be totally worthy of it. You might do something wonderful with that $1,000,000, but you're asking the wrong person. I don't have it to give to you. And I think at the moment, many men don't have it to give. They haven't deconstructed. Women have been deconstructing around patriarchy for God knows how long. Men are not prepared to look at that yet, because if that doesn't work, what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is probably that there's going to be the people they've oppressed more at the helm, and that's a terrifying prospect to them. So whenever the question is, how do I convince the men in my life whatever, or how do I get the man in my life to understand whatever, it is a both liberating and depressing reality that you cannot, and it's not your job. I think that's why I keep saying men have to do that work for each other now. And there are men who are deconstructing and liberated from this stuff and are doing the work and showing up in allyship. Like, they're out there. They just need more men amongst their ranks, and that is going to be a slow burn. Next one, has your relationship with femininity, always struggle with that word, she got it out, shifted at all as you've started unpacking patriarchal stuff? It absolutely has, especially given my background with an eating disorder that really was very tied into my perception of myself, how other people perceived me. A lot of my experiences growing up, I was very tall. I hit 6 foot by the time I was like 11, always being seen as someone who wasn't attractive or wasn't appealing in the ways that I thought I needed to be, like being small and diminutive and sweet. And I was just never any of those things. I never felt very feminine, and smallness to me equaled femininity. So obviously going through my recovery and unpacking that was central to getting the eating disorders grip off me. And I've talked about it before. A book that really helped me, which comes with a big caveat, was The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf. 2 caveats. 1, very white feminism, written in the 90s. 2, Naomi Wolf has since gone down the QAnon rabbit hole. So we've lost Naomi, as we have many of the people who have contributed great and good things, or become transphobes. One of those more obvious than others. And so I just give that caveat because I don't want anyone to hear that name and be like, oh, is she also aligned with Naomi on other things? Absolutely not. So going into that with that caveat, it is a really, really powerful book, knowing that it has its limitations. And then I would couple that with another book that I read post my recovery, which is called The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. And there's also a workbook with that, which is fantastic, which obviously is much more inclusive, much more current, and just beautifully written, and goes into experiences which sort of diversify and broaden our understanding of how we can heal in these ways. So I went from feeling very much like I didn't have any connection to femininity, as I was, based on how I was treated and how I was perceived, and things that were said to me and things that happened to me. And then I felt more connected to it during recovery, but the thing that I got out of that process the most was not owing people femininity, not owing them beauty, not owing them performing my sexuality or my beauty and femininity in any way. Like, I get to be this multifaceted whole human being in all the different ways, where sometimes I do feel way more connected to that. Sometimes I feel like I am very neutral in sort of how I connect to those themes. Sometimes I feel like I'm in the absolute opposite direction, and I just don't give it a lot of thought because I unpacked it so long ago. And I think that regardless of how you present or how you embody those things. I think if the ultimate thing you take away is that there's no wrong way to connect to those things, if your ultimate takeaway is that you don't owe it to anybody. And I think if you make decisions about how you express yourself and how you present to the world with the full knowledge of maybe some of your conditioning, like I'm not saying, I mean, look, I dye my hair, clearly not recently. Do I do that because I really like my hair being that color? Yeah, I do. Do I also probably do it because I've been conditioned to think that that's what I should do to present the way that I want to present? Yeah, probably. Do I pluck my eyebrows? Would I have connected eyebrows? And no shame in your game if that's your thing. If I let them go, yes, I would. Why do I do it? I don't really interrogate it and investigate it ad nauseum to the point where I'm just too self-aware. But I certainly know that I'm conditioned to do it. I prefer to do it. I prefer, not all the time. You'll see plenty of videos where they are absolutely not just sisters, or twins. They are connected. And again, because I don't owe that to anybody. In seasons of my life where I want to do that, I do it. In seasons of my life where I don't want to do it, I don't do it. And I think you can see that particularly on TikTok. I felt that really on TikTok in terms of how that liberated me, in terms of how I present and how I'm allowed to present. You'll see me waking up the day after I've had the worst fever of my life and my hair is matted and I've clearly been sweating through my clothes and my eyes are half shut closed and I'm puffy, or other days where I'm totally inflamed with endo, or days where I have a really bad rash on my face. Sometimes people will get at me because I put filters on when that happens, but that's usually just because I get a lot of really awful trolling when that happens, less that I, attach that to worth or my value or anything. But that's the other thing as well, is that you're also allowed to have insecurities. You're allowed to have this very diverse relationship with self and body and femininity and appearance and beauty and all these kinds of things. It's not meant to be one static experience that you have or feeling that you have about yourself or those things. I think as long as your worth and your identity and sense of self isn't dependent on those things, then you're in a pretty good spot. I think if you couldn't navigate your life as you usually would want to, unless you really rigidly meet these expectations for yourself, then that's when you're in a bit of like red flag territory. So it's shifted a lot, but the most important shift has been that I don't owe it to anyone. I don't owe people beauty, femininity. I don't owe them, presenting in a way that makes them feel comfortable or like I'm performing the way that I'm supposed to. I have no energy or time for performance. Do you think it's actually possible to have a truly equal romantic relationship while we're still living in a patriarchal world? No. If it's with a man and you're a woman, no. Sadly, no. You can have the greatest, most engaged, most giving, conscious, thoughtful, aware partner in a man, and the world won't even allow you to have a fair and equitable relationship in that sort of heteronormative sense, because it's not really just even up to the two of you. I think that motherhood is a really great example of this, where you often will see women saying, my partner promised me that if we had children, that he would be an equal caregiver and he would take an equal share of the mental load and the physical labor and the parenting labor. And they can hand on heart say that their partner has absolutely, to the extent that they are capable, they have done that. But there are just built-in things with that responsibility that can never be truly shared. I have learned so much from mothers, especially as I've gone through my decision-making process of staying child-free by choice, where I have learned so much about the harsh realities that a lot of mothers go through, where if you have a partner who says, we have a kid, it's going to be 50-50. Well, he's not carrying the baby for half of that process, right? While it's still in your body. He's not giving of his energy and his nourishment, and women talking about the fact that their teeth have basically disintegrated and their hair falls out and they suffer these extremely challenging physical experiences from the pregnancy process and especially childbirth. Like, how can you go 50-50 on that unless you're kicking him in the nuts the whole time? And even then, it's not producing anything, right? So I think that although one of the clearer indicators of how impossible that is, there are then all of the societal expectations which mold behavior. That means that so many things are probably going to be going missed, even with the most, as I said, aware and intentional and thoughtful partner. Even the way that our families or our friends might influence us or ask things of us that they wouldn't ask of our partner, which adds more to the load and to our labor. No, it is not. I don't believe it's possible. I think it's possible to find a partner with every intention of trying to fulfill that, even though it's like for aforementioned reasons, I don't think it's totally executable. I think there are men like that out there. I don't think they're a dime a dozen. And so it's not to say that it's not a valuable, beautiful relationship, or that the family dynamic isn't beautiful and as close to what we would want it to be as possible. But so much of our talk around how women can meet equity and equality puts the onus on the individual person or the individual couple or the individual family, where it's like there's only so much we can do at an individual level without dismantling the systems and the structures which put limits around how much that can really shift and change, right? So is it possible to find someone who will do their absolute best to meet those outcomes? Sure. Is it actually something that can be achieved? I'm going to say no. Some people might say, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as always, but no, a lot of this isn't personal responsibility or the onus of the individual to be able to push against those limits. You've said you're going to be having a hysterectomy soon. How are you feeling about it? Interesting you ask this, because in an episode of the Beyond Body podcast that I host with my co-host Holly about eating disorders and mental health, I was just talking about the fact that I think I'm going to be expediting that hysterectomy. I've just had one of the worst months with endometriosis I've ever had. It was absolutely shocking, especially from an energy perspective and pain perspective. It was just awful. It's weird because, as I've said, I'm very, very resolute that I'm not going to be having a child and that I have no desire to have a child. I caught a plane over here and just my hat goes off to all the parents, because I don't know how you do it. So much love to all of you. I am not the person on the plane eye rolling at screaming babies and children, because I was also one of those children whose ears used to get all blocked up from the pressure, and I would scream my little head off. So whenever I hear that, I just hear little people in pain. But I just don't know how you do it. I just think you're all amazing, just amazing. So even though that's not something I want, there is obviously like a real finality to having your uterus taken out of your body. And I think I'm definitely going to go and explore in therapy maybe some of those final kind of feelings, which I always do. Whenever I have something big that I'm doing or a decision I'm making, I always try to go back to therapy, even if it's just for a couple of sessions, just to be like, I don't actually know if I have any feelings about this or if there's anything here to unpack. But in case there is, I want to be prepared. Like, I want to know before it all kind of hits me like a ton of bricks. Because, yeah, there's a finality to it. And I have seen other women who have had hysterectomies who never wanted to have children talking about the fact that there is an emotional weight to the finality of it and taking something completely off the table. But given I have stage 4 endo and so many complications from it, and my health is so severely impacted by it, my thinking is fertility probably was going to be a massive problem for me. So I don't even think I'm losing anything, but it is obviously quite a significant major surgery. And then there is like that final element to it as well. So in limbo in terms of how I am feeling about it, because I don't really know how I feel about it just yet, but I will definitely keep you posted. I think it's a process and a journey that I'll definitely share here on TikTok, because it doesn't get spoken about enough. And there's so many different things that we can put on the table for women as far as their health and obviously their choices. And I'm somebody who doesn't live a super traditional life. I kind of don't fit a lot of the molds of choices which women traditionally make as far as like partnership, marriage, children, all that sort of stuff, how I spend my time, how I see my life panning out, which is why I'm so passionate about sharing my own experience with that, and also in upcoming episodes introducing you to women who have all kind of varied experiences. And that actually leads us into the final question. How do you handle the loneliness or pushback that can come with choosing a different path to other people? Great question, because I'm not someone who's super prone to loneliness. I'm very like my dad in that I have a very rich sort of inner life, particularly from like a creativity standpoint. I don't really experience loneliness often. It will happen occasionally, and then I will experience it to a severe degree. Mostly when I'm thinking about like losing people really close to me, because I've been through a lot of loss, which was very traumatic. And so there's a bit of like a trauma response there. And so then I have this like anticipated loneliness, which I should have learned from my traumatic losses, that the brain is amazing and we are more adaptable and resilient than we realize. And things open up and other people can fill spaces. Like they can't replace people that significant to you, like the people I lost, but there is space that can be filled if you welcome it in and you're curious and open. But pushback, I don't really, it sounds really intense, but I don't really care. I just don't. I care more about living the life that I want to live than I care about what other people think of it. I have just always been like that. I've never really been someone who gravitates towards groups or anything like that. I have always kind of gone my own way and done my own thing because the alternative terrifies me, really terrifies me. And so I don't really care. That doesn't mean that I don't take in feedback and I'm not receptive to other people's opinions. But when it comes to your life path, this isn't like someone having an opinion about your opinion. This is someone having an opinion about something that literally doesn't affect them at all. Like your choices about what you're going to choose to do or not do in your life should have zero impact on someone else. And if they think it does, they need to go to therapy, and because that's their thing to unpack. It's not for you to make decisions that are going to make someone else's life more how they want it to be. Do you know what I mean? Like life and relationships are a series of compromises, but you shouldn't be making decisions where you forfeit who you are and how you want to live your life to make somebody else's life wonderful. That sounds like a terrible deal. I certainly care about the feedback of the people closest to me. I'm very lucky. I have very close, affirming relationships, and I'm very lucky that they just support me in the choices I make and are really encouraging. And like I think of my mum, who when I told her I had decided I didn't want to have children and, that I wanted to forge my own path and, keep pursuing things that were important to me, like advocacy and career and relationships that took a different form than maybe how people see like the nuclear family being what relationships are supposed to be. She will say to me often, like, I just am really proud of you and I really respect your ability to like live your life really authentically, which means a lot to me, because telling her that I didn't want to have children, she was probably the person I was most concerned about, because she's not going to have grandchildren. But with the world the way it is now, I don't think she's that concerned about that anymore. And like I said, the only loneliness that I experience is preemptive loneliness, where I fear that I'll be lonely in my choices down the track because I don't have a lot of family, but I have friendships which are very much like family, and I'm very connected to a lot of people in a real variety of ways. So it's more preemptive. It's more me like having anxieties about the future. And you just can't live in that space, right? You just cannot live there. You have to make whatever choices feel most authentic and connected for you now. And I also know that when I've made decisions for my future self that feel really scary, where I have similar kind of predictions, like, but how am I going to feel and how is that actually going to pan out? It always pans out great. Like when I was going through recovery, I had so many fears about what I was doing and what direction I was heading in. And I would be like, but I have to trust my instinct. I just have to trust it. I don't know what else to do. I just have, and it's that time has passed where I've thought it could lead to disaster, and I get to that point of my life, and I'm like, yep, you made the right choices. I'm super stoked. I'm so glad we're here. Thank you for doing that past Mia, as scary as it was. So yeah, I just think you cannot live there for too long. I think you should check it as far as some data that helps you make your decisions, but I don't think we can live in any one place for too long, whether that's living too much in the past, too much in the now, too much in the future. I think it's got to be a healthy mix of all three. And I live in the past in the sense that I learn from those choices I've made that have led me to the outcomes I want, and trust in that pattern that I've sort of delivered for myself repeatedly. Try to live in the now, to be present, and try to connect to the instinct that is coming through to me now. And then living in the future to check, okay, well, where would this lead me? What do I think is going to happen? And trying to use that data set of all three to make the best choice without then thinking it has to be the perfect choice. One of my mantras is next best choice. I say it to myself all the time. I get very easily overwhelmed. My mind goes at a million miles an hour. I've got 600 things I want to be doing at once. Next best choice. Not the perfect choice, not to get to the greatest outcome, just the next thing that's going to meet my needs and take care of the here and now. So that was just a little short one for us this week. I'm going to go and probably get in the pool. And then I've got a little work call, and then a very early one for me because I got in at midnight last night and I was awake at 5:30 with the sun coming up, because I'm trying to soak up every minute. But much love to you all. See you in a couple of weeks with another episode, probably going to be a guest episode. And thank you so much for being here. Talk to you soon. Bye.